everyone. We're out here live in Vegas for Black Hat. This is going to be a great special edition of the Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday to you. Greetings from wonderful Las Vegas, where it's hot enough to roast meat on the streets. Luckily, we're not out on the streets. We're in our studios here at the Luxor Pyramid, directly next to Mandalay Bay, where Black Hat's going on. And we've got a special edition of Black Hat Techstrong Gang. I'm joined today by two of my fellow Techstrong correspondent and gang members who have been covering Black Hat with me. Let me start off, first of all, attending, I don't know, his 20th Black Hat, maybe more?
Something like that, yeah.
My friend CTO here at Techstrong, as well as CTA at Futura, Mitch Ashley. Mitch, welcome. How are you?
It's hot enough the eggs are cooking eggs on the street.
Absolutely. I feel like when I go out there, I'm baking, literally, from the inside out.
I'm not sure I have souls left in my shoes.
You know, don't pay any attention to that climate change. But anyway, but we're not here to talk about the weather. There's plenty of hot stuff going on at Black Hat. Speaking of hot stuff going on at Black Hat, we're really happy to have for the first time in person at a Techstrong Gang. It's our roving editor extraordinaire, the one and only John Swartz. John,
how's
welcome.
It going?
It's great to have you on,
to meet
man.
you guys. By the
be
way,
in person.
I had a cab driver take me, and he told me we're going to be in a cooling period today. He said it's going to be down to 109.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
We have that to look forward to.
Yeah,
until
that's
October
great.
here, I guess. All right.
Till October?
He says it's going to be hot as hell through September.
I thought it already is.
Yeah, 54 straight days.
I mean, look,
over 100
I'm not
degrees.
one to talk. I live in South Florida where our humidity is crazy. But this is oppressive. I don't know. This might fall under cruel and inhuman punishment.
It was
to live this, I mean,
117
being
at one
homeless
point.
here, living on the street.
Yeah, I actually, I mean, we're not. I don't mean to digress, but I was talking to a couple people here about how do you survive in these conditions if you're homeless, and it was, it's just going to fry your brain.
I mean, it's one way of getting rid of the homeless situation.
That's not a great way.
Yeah.
No.
Don't give anybody ideas.
I heard they're building high-speed rail to San Francisco.
Well, there's a project to go to Los Angeles, which will take at least a decade. But I've heard about these projects off and
Well,
on
I'm
for
just
30
thinking
years.
that would make like the Homeless Express or something.
Oh, come on. Yeah, I know.
It's just what we
I
need.
know, just what we need. Sorry.
No, but hey, it's not all about the weather. We're here to discuss Black Hat. And I've been going to Black Hat for a couple of years myself. I think on my first Black Hat, Mitchell and I, probably at the same time, 2003, 2004.
0304, yep.
And, you know, let me just play historian for a second, guys. When we first started going to Black Hat, it was at Caesar's Palace.
Right.
There was no exhibit expo floor. The vendors were in the hallways, and they had little stands in the hallway. And then we had breakout sessions in the rooms. And the breakout sessions, it wasn't everything in security, excuse me. It was truly about hacking. We didn't even call it AppSec then.
No.
It was about hacking. You know, like, and I remember crazy things. Barnaby Jones, right? Making the ATM machine spit out cash. The guy from Cisco got shut down from talking about a vulnerability that was out there. The Wall of Sheep.
Wall of Shame, yeah. The sheep.
There was sheep. And we go from Black Hat directly into DEF CON. DEF CON's still at Rio, right? It's crazy. Today's, and I said it before, today's Black Hat is more RSA in the desert. So by implication to me, that was always sort of, well, it's an imitation of RSA, and you can never be as good as the original.
I think it's a recognition of, when we started coming, people that were doing hacking or research, white hat kind of work, that was a way off edge case. Only a few people were doing that. And
Right, yeah, relatively, yeah.
the rest of the folks were maybe becoming security engineers, right?
Well, but no, it was also, Black Hat back then was known as the place where, like, the feds
Right.
Mitch was
would
mentioning
interact
there was
with
a
the hacking
FBI
community.
presence.
FBI was there.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a
And it
time.
was kind of tied together as it was Black Hat DevCon. It was
There's
like the
one thing. It was,
continuation.
well, the previous owner and former, of course, owns Black Hat now, but Robert, is it Robert Moss? I forget his name, Morris. Anyway, the guy who started Black Hat, he started both of them. So it was a continuation. The DEF CON was always a little edgier, to tell you the truth.
I didn't talk about what happened at DEF CON, but back then.
Not even going to go there. But back to Black Hat RSA in the desert. Today, it's not edgy like that. It's all things security. And it is sort of RSA in the desert. But I'm going to tell you something with all due respect to my RSA friends, and I love the RSA folks. This might be bigger than RSA. It kind of almost feels that way.
So I talked to one of the organizers yesterday, and she told me there were about 17,000 people
Is that all?
this year. Yes, she thought that was a high number. I did
17?
17.
I was
That
told
seems
last
low.
year I had 40.
Okay,
So if it's only 17, it's substantially smaller.
smaller. And RSA is
RSA is
it's
40
kind of
and
a
change.
it's like a P.T. Barnum.
Well, you know what? So's this.
Yeah,
And if you're going to do a circus, what better place to do it than Vegas?
right? Got the best venue.
You know, but they both of these shows are by the security industry, for the security industry, and they're very much sort of that insider thing. Though, as you know, John, you've been a mainstream media guy.
Yeah.
Mitchell and I, not so much. They do attract a decent mainstream
So
media.
right, so the
presence.
Associated Press reporter is moderating the keynote, or moderated the keynote on Wednesday, which is about election integrity and security. And I think, fairly or unfairly, what CrowdStrike did was it garnered a lot of publicity, especially on CNN, Today's Show. So it raises the profile of the show, which I think, in a sense, helps the industry, but it also kind of cheapens the viewpoint for the masses, right? They have an overly simplistic, almost
Well,
kind
it's
of
least common
doomsday-
denominator.
doomsday, like, oh, something went wrong. You know, that was an extenuating circumstance. I hope, but nonetheless.
You know, we've spoken about this on Techstrong Gang, right? About the CrowdStrike situation. What was interesting, and I'll be very candid, I don't come here and do a lot of interviews with vendors. I come here to see my people. And we had a chance to see some folks last night. I've been seeing a lot of people in the hallways and the water cooler conversations. There was a lot less sympathy for CrowdStrike
Yes.
than I thought there would be.
So interesting. I heard a lot of venom directed toward Delta, and I think we mentioned this in the
Yes.
show a few days ago or a week ago, that they, in a sense, hung CrowdStrike out to dry, or they weren't entirely responsible or culpable. And I also heard a fair amount of side swipes at Microsoft, and it's kind of what happens, right?
inside.
Right. So there are three parties involved, but that's interesting. Why were they so? Why were they so? Hard on
Honestly, my opinion, jealousy, petty jealousy. You know what? George Kurt's done a hell of a job building that company. We know George, of course, Mitchell from Poundstone and McAfee, and it's a decent company. Did they have a crappy QA for their updates? Yes. Will they do that again? I bet you hell no, because you could bet before they put any
If they do,
updates.
then you've got to.
If they do, it's another story. But I've said this before, I'll say it again. It could happen to anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And it has. And
Yeah.
And that's why, to the credit of Palo Alto Networks, I've mentioned this before, they refuse to talk about this and
Right.
find glory.
But how many? My email is littered with requests here for Black Hat to talk to companies who would say how it wouldn't happen had you used their stuff.
Yeah.
What's the economic impact? What's the society impact? What's that impact? Find some real news. Go play in front of your own house.
I think, what I get off my lawn, right? What I've heard, and just talking kind of at the CISO level, more of the kind of security leadership. One is, it's a huge wake-up call for everyone to say, what are you doing? This could happen with anybody's software that you're using, not just CrowdStrike. Yeah, so they improve their process, but you as the receiver of that software, those updates, whatever it is, you have to have the ability either to stage it or to recover if something serious happens. So it pointed out a huge weakness of, go set these devices out there, it's got endpoint software on it, let's just forget about it. The other, and I said this to a CISO, and he said, I just said the same thing half an hour ago, which is if all we get out of this experience, and I say all, besides the financial damage and things, but if all we get out of this is a better CrowdStrike, better quality, better distribution of their software, then we missed a huge, really valuable learning opportunity for everybody, both if you're supplying updates as well as if you're receiving them. So I think hopefully if we can kind of keep that part of the conversation going, I don't need to bash CrowdStrike.
I mean, I give kudos to Kurtz for being a stand-up CEO. He's the one guy who has claimed or accepted responsibility. And, you know, in a sense, he took some bullets for some other folks.
Yeah.
And I think the truth always usually comes out, right? And so we'll see.
But it's not dominating the conversation. I don't think CrowdStrike is here. Maybe it is the people that are trolling to get us to talk to them.
Probably. Opportunism, market up. That's just like the lowest form, though, to me, of trying to sell a product is benefiting from somebody else's dire situation.
We would never do that.
We would never do that. No, the press, mainstream press never did that.
Or product companies would never do that.
You know what? It sells newspapers, as they say.
No, the best place,
I was
the
in
best
that area,
day
yeah.
to be a security salesperson is the day after a breach or some incident, right?
That's
Unfortunately.
Christmas in July or August. As
We've
the
had-
case.
So
Yeah,
my granddaughter, she was going with her other grandparents up to Oregon, and she was peppering them questions about CrowdStrike.
Really?
She was 4 years old. And she
4
was
years
asking
old?
all these questions about it, and she's referring to me, because, so how's he covering that? What is he going to say about it? And my daughter-in-law was trying to be diplomatic about it. I said, you know, I don't work at Dow Jones or USA Today anymore, so it's more tempered, you know, it's a little bit lower temperature.
Yeah. But, you know, we could sit here and say this all we want, right? We could sit here and say this all we want. But the fact of the matter is that these incidents, which do rise up to the mainstream media, I think in the long run help
It does
the
help,
security
yeah.
business
Because that was always
with visibility.
Right. So a colleague of mine at the paper years ago, we did a book, and one of the things we found out about cybersecurity, or something that was always driven home, is that most people are unaware or don't care about a topic like this unless they are directly affected.
Right.
So the fact that so many people, unfortunately, were impacted, it raises a level of awareness, which kind of plays into, I was going to make a pivot, I guess, to Wednesday's keynote panel on secure elections and integrity, which also plays into this narrative that, is our election going to be safe? I mean, I think there have been more elections, or there will be more elections this year among more countries, affecting more than 2 million people who could conceivably vote, than ever before. So we have the US, India, France, Britain, Venezuela just voted. And it kind of brought into focus AI and the generative AI, and the concern that the election results may not be, they'll be influenced in a sense by people's perception. So they're going to be susceptible to misinformation in various forms. They already are. We are seeing deep fakes. Nothing really huge yet. I mean, maybe we'll find out later. But there's also this one interesting thing that people mentioned to me, where that's just the deepfakes that hurt the other candidate, but deepfakes that actually enhance the image of one of the candidates. Like in India, there was a candidate whose deceased father was speaking on behalf of the candidate, even though the person had been dead for 7 years. And I brought up the idea, if you perform, say you have a rally before a disappointing crowd and you're unhappy with the results, could you conceively add people to the crowd and make it look as if it's standing room
That
only?
wasn't done in the inauguration of 2016.
Yeah, and there will be more of that. This idea, though, and again, it's like you feed off deception and you create this narrative where people don't trust the system. And I just go
So,
back. It's just going to happen again.
Yeah. So here's my point with that, though, and why I'm against it. All that does is feed into the narrative of one of the parties running in this election who want to cast doubt. They're already they've got their lawyers lined up, and they want the perception to be that this is a suspect election here in the U.S. I'm not talking about Venezuela. Venezuela's already been proven, but enough parties have come out and said that that election was stolen.
Yeah.
Right? The reporting was done. But I'm going to say this, I'm going to say it loud and clear. I think the record is like 67-0 for every lawsuit that was brought about the last election's election fraud. We don't have an election fraud problem in this country. And anyone who's telling you we do is just setting the narrative because they're anticipating having to make that argument. Now, is social media influencing people? Will AI enhance social media's ability to influence people?
Right.
Yes. But this is not a new problem. AI is a new technology.
It's kind of like accelerating the social media issue, like going back to 2016 in particular, 2020 at lesser extent.
Yeah.
And there's always that fear. And I remember talking to Alex Stamos, who used to be at Facebook, who was whistleblower until he left under bad circumstances. And he says what scares him is this idea that there maybe is something happening that we just don't know about in history repeating itself. And he thinks it's very likely. And also, I think part of his conspiracy theory, which has a lot of validity, is a lot of the companies were cutting back on the security side of things during their scaling back of operations. So it's unwitting, and it's a financial decision, but it's a financial decision that comes with a risk.
Well, it's interesting because you're not going to pull back deep fakes. You're not going to pull back misinformation. It's not going away. I mean, whether there's detection capabilities saying this is not, real or whatever. I heard a saying the other day, it kind of resonated with me, is the only real remedy to misinformation is communication.
I do say the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Right. Well, that's true too. But World War II and who was this? The British Prime Minister. Yeah. Oh, that's right.
It was
FDR. It was FDR.
FDR. Yeah, you're right.
Different.
Well, can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
So I talked to a couple people who had extreme viewpoints, and one of them...
At a security conference?
I know. Well, this one was a little out there. He was like, we have a history of Chicago politics, Mayor Daley, his machine, the 60 election.
68. Oh, 60 election, right.
With
yes.
JFK and Nixon.
Cook County.
And he mentioned that in 2000 and 2004, he spoke before North Carolina legislators about how, in a sense, voter security was susceptible in terms of the actual tabulation of votes, which he said he proved to them.
Of course.
And then and then Christopher Krebs came along and tightened things up only to oust him and then try to unravel things. Is there any evidence or
I'm going to say it again.
Can happen?
There's never been any voter fraud of any substance or consequence in this country.
Comes up with the outliers, and on the flip side, I have others who say absolutely no problem.
The only outlier, look, you want to say, and it wasn't only Daley, it was the mob and everyone else in Chicago that supposedly Joe Kennedy made the deal with, and then Bobby Kennedy backstabbed them or whatever. But I don't think that was what it is either, to tell you the truth. But in modern history, and by the way, that wasn't digital voting machines.
That's
it
all
was very different. In our country today, we have yet to see evidence of any widespread voter fraud. And in Florida, where I live, our anti-woke governor spent a couple of $1 million creating a separate police force for elections integrity. And the only arrests they've ever made were Republicans voting for Trump multiple times.
Yeah.
So, and even those, they weren't enough to
it's
move the needle.
Yeah. I also think about, when I think about deep fakes, I think about just deceiving people to the point where there was the robocall, right, for Biden, where he dissuades people from voting in a primary. I think there are people who generally do not know there is a primary than a general election. So you kind of build off of that. And then there was the Kamala Harris deep fake that Musk posted, which reached 150 million views. I mean, that's what worries me actually more than anything
else. It worries
else,
me too.
Is undercutting people's confidence or just preying on their ignorance at times.
So you did a quote of FDR. I'm going to do a quote from an another great American, Cy Sims of Sims, I'll paraphrase him, right? An educated citizen is our best customer.
It is.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, the problem we have in this country are too many people who are not, I don't want to use the word sophisticated, but are not sensitive enough, let's say, to ferret out obvious things like this.
Well, I think we also forget that there are far more many people who don't distrust the integrity of the elections, that are, fine with it, versus those that are.
I think the vast majority.
We hear about the craziness.
The people running out here saying that it's illegal immigrants
Exactly.
who are voting.
That gets all the
collecting
attention.
Social
It's kind
Security.
of like the people yelling fire, right? And everybody else.
But again, it's people who are, what they're looking to do is make the ground fertile for when they,
And also I will take an arrow for mainstream media, and I mean, looking back, the normalization of things, of people that we shouldn't be doing that with. In a sense, it kind of gives them a forum to spread their misinformation.
Exactly.
And I just, it even goes back to New York Times and the way they treated Biden versus Trump's cognitive dissonance.
absolutely.
And CNN
sells newspapers.
CNN's basic idea is like, we'll give 50% airtime to each side, even if one of the sides is utterly crazy. This is just a flaw that just hasn't been addressed. So, again,
Let's bring it back to Black Hat, though,
yeah.
because I'm sorry we went off on that
Sorry about
tangent,
that.
but it is. I mean, look, beyond election-related integrity issues, other themes that we're seeing here at Black Hat this year, as always, there's always a bunch of vendors out here who are looking, as we mentioned before, with CrowdStrike, right, to step on someone's back to get ahead there.
I ran into somebody at Splunk. She's part of their security research team, and they came out with a survey of 1,600 security executives, and they found, and this is something we've talked about probably before, that a third of the companies or organizations they work for do not have a policy, whether it's data compliance or security compliance. And so, in a sense, it's creating this disconnect. And I'm also hearing the friction, now I'll use a different word, the conflict between the top management and the rank and file. So in the haste, again, to adopt generative AI as quickly as possible, they are moving so fast that they're not, security is a secondary concern of theirs, right? Which is always happening. It's not just generative
That's
AI.
not new.
It's not new, right? But now they're afraid, though, this technology moves so fast that in their haste to get there, they are, in a sense, cutting their own throats or slitting their own throats.
There's a lot of talk about, for example, I know Talos at Cisco put out a blog post just yesterday talking about securing LLMs, which I went to a session that had a number of folks from their search team. And one of the things I was curious about is, there's always traditional security, kind of what we started out in, Alan, right, with network security. And how much is that spilling over or expanding into software security, supply chain security, AI, things like that? And in some organizations it is, many I think it's not. But the attack vector, the complexity of the surface of what we've got to protect, it's almost expanding exponentially. And if you're a security professional, it's already so many things to know, so many security technology skills, et cetera. How are they going to protect that? So I think we're going to end up with some specialists, people that are AppSec specialists, AI specialists, data security. And maybe that's happening in a number of organizations, but I don't know any other way that a security team can say, yeah, we're meeting our requirements, right?
The Splunk person was referencing Talos, and they were mentioning large language models and trying to find ways to secure them, whether internally or through a third party, and this misperception that defending an LLM is out of reach, right? That was something that she brought up, and she also mentioned prompt injection attacks.
Prompt injection, data
Prompt
poisoning.
injection's a way of poisoning, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the deal, in my mind anyway. AI is going to exert new pressures at different points of the security spectrum. We are not going to be able to defend those unless we employ AI to help defend it, right? It takes one to know one kind of thing. Because at the scale and speed that needs to be done, I don't know if you could do it with humans. That being said,
so
Go ahead.
that leads. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go.
So part of this 1,600 person survey asked a question about Gen AI. Will it benefit attackers or defenders? And it was an even split in terms of.
Absolutely, I think it is. But this is the way of security. I mean, is it faster with AI? Yeah, but it's always, what is the Andrew Clay Schaefer about DevOps says the DevOps you get is the DevOps you deserve. Mm-hmm. It's the same is true with security. Security you get is the security you deserve, meaning if you prioritize it and do the right thing with it, you'll get a decent level of security. If you're looking at it as a cost center and a checkbox, you're going to get that level of security. And I think that's the message that's here. But AI is certainly a big thing here at Black Hat this year.
Yes, security is friction in the AI rush is what a couple of people were saying.
Yeah, well, but security is always friction. I remember we did a survey, it was a couple of years ago already, asking developers, does security slow down your development cycles? Like 80% said yes.
Right.
60% on the next question said they want security to do that because they realize they need a break in the system, a handbrake.
Something's got to catch it.
So, that made me think about what just happened with OpenAI, right?
Yes.
Okay, more people left. And I think you could probably come to the conclusion there's a recurring theme at OpenAI, which actually applied to Meta, where they build things so fast, they break them along the way. There's kind of Altman is channeling his inner Zuckerberg. And these folks, the co-founders, are going to Anthropic or somewhere or starting their own companies. I want to ask you about that too, because that in a sense is happening with OpenAI, right?
Absolutely. Mitch?
No, I was going to say, I wonder if data in all of our policies, and I think about all the forms that I fill out with companies that we do business with, right? Do you have these policies in place? How do you protect BII? All that kind of thing. AI doesn't work without data. That's the rocket fuel of AI. Is it sort of the concern about data that will put some of the controls around, particularly LLMs, but machine learning, things like that?
Yeah.
Is that the place that's going to put some kind of sensibility of security around how that data is being used in those LLMs or machine learning machine learning algorithms, things like that? It was interesting too. I went to a session last night with the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, which is a collaboration, a group of a whole bunch of companies, AWS, Splunk, a number of people, Comcast, our folks. And they're working on the problem of just how do we exchange security information, right, across systems. It's one thing to throw all your logs into a Splunk or to a Sumo Logic or whatever application. It's another to say, well, we need the context and the intelligence of all that data. So because just looking at one system or one SIM or whatever it is isn't enough. So there's still just some fundamental problems that are challenges to work, and they're making some really good progress. I like what they're doing. So shout out to the folks doing that. So it's good to see people working on sort of the nuts and bolts of what we've got to fix for this stuff. So I guess my ultimate point was that in many ways, to me, it comes down to the data, protecting it as opposed to how do we protect devices and all the normal things that we do. That too.
I think we got to take a break. I think we
went along.
We blew through a few breaks. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We'll be right back.
Everybody, we're back here talking from Black Hat. You know, Al and I, we've been doing security for a long time. John, you've been covering it for a long time. For quite a while, I felt like the security industry was kind of deft of new, really true innovation. And I'm not being critical of other people, though that sounds very critical of it. It's just like a lot of the sameness, right? A lot of intrusion prevention, we've been doing that. A lot of endpoint security, we've been doing that. A lot of good things happen. So I always look for like what's new and unique. And some of it is coming up because of AI and uses of AI. But I had a conversation with actually the former CISO at Salesforce, who also was the head of security for Xbox at Microsoft. John Alkin, I think is his last name, if I say that correctly. With Alaria, he started up a company 2 years ago. And his, entrepreneur story, right? I had this problem with the company that I worked in, so I went out and I started a startup to address that. And it wasn't quite that directly connected, but pretty close. And interesting what they're doing is, we've always had this data exhaust that comes off of all these tools and applications and things like that. So they're doing some unique things around leveraging that information and then adding more graph contextual information to say, what's Alan doing, right? What is the data objects or the applications or the locations or whatever it might be that are happening? And you can use that for compliance reasons, like here's our policies. We have things out of compliance. And you can also just to get a bigger picture. What I thought was particularly interesting, Alan, was John was talking about at some point going into an automation mode of applying policy, like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or let's apply this without human intervention. It reminded me of the intrusion detection, moving to intrusion prevention days. But we have a lot of that that's kind of matured
Absolutely.
in our
You
products,
know what?
right?
The security, the world's changed since those days, Mitch, where we used to be very hesitant to allow security tools to automatically take action, right? Not just alert. But again, it goes back to my comment before about you got to fight fire with fire.
Mm-hmm.
When things are going at this speed, if you're not going to play at that speed, go home. And so I think we're all a lot more desensitized or more likely to allow automated security to take place. Now, that works against you. That had we done a little more QA before we rolled out the CrowdStrike plugin, maybe we
That's
avoid all
the
that.
trust, right?
Right.
I mean, and maybe there's assumed trust for whatever reason, company reputation.
I don't know.
Until it's not.
I don't know if it's trust or desensitization. Right? My phone was here last night, and look, there was a time when I'd go to Black Hat, I wouldn't plug my phone in on.
Oh yeah, I didn't take my credit card.
I had,
stayed in the vault.
I had my own incident. But that being said, I logged onto the Wi-Fi here at the hotel last night.
Yeah, I saw.
Chris-
I was on. saw your stuff. I was watching what you're doing.
And I figured as much. That really wasn't me in the picture, Mitch. It was a deep fake. I wish it was me.
It's all right. It's
wasn't
on
my
Facebook.
I know it got you going.
And it's on Facebook now.
It's on Facebook. Good. Anyway, the point I was making was when I did log online, immediately a bunch of my apps started updating, and I thought for a second, oh my God, I'm a Black Hat, and they're updating my apps. I said, nah, it's just as the way it is. They update every time. And so far, nothing bad's happened, but this is the way of the world. So I think we are in an age where, automated response is the rule of the day.
Yeah, and we don't even know it. I mean, one of the things like the CrowdStrike and Defender and others do is, look at processes. They shut
it, but
down
we don't.
inside our application, our systems that we don't even know about.
Can I ask a question of both of you? So you referenced, Mitch, like this idea. That's true, right? This concept that cybersecurity there's been a lot of sameness or repetition. First of all, why is that? And then second of all, I think you kind of answered it. Does Gen AI create a kind of killer app or movement in addressing things that hadn't been done before? Because I think of other industries like even like smartphone chips, they advance, and cybersecurity is kind of a little bit different pace.
I think it's the mental paradigm shift, if you want to think of it that way, of defending. Our job is to build the best defenses and then keep as much out as we can and respond if we have to. Now we're living in a world of everybody will get hacked multiple times. Matter of fact, your response is even more important than your defense. Not that it's less, but in terms of your ability, if you can't respond quickly. And that's pushed all the way up into your software development team, right? You may not need to push 10 updates an hour into production, but God forbid you need to get a patch out there quickly. You don't want it to be the first time. It's like I don't know how to hit that golf shot. Well, if you've hit it 20 times before, you know how to hit it, right? So there's been that shift both from defense to response. I think the other part of it is thinking about network security versus the entire environment security, and that's what's changed. And
just an intertwined system that
it's like the human body is like holistic medicine versus, okay, here's your central nervous system. Well, there's a lot of other things happening, right? And how do you think about,
But as you said before, we're moving back into an age of specialists.
Mm-hmm. Well, a specialist, but in a context of something, right? Versus I'm a firewall guy, or I'm an ops person that does just this thing. I think the security team as a whole has to operate in a context of what are we trying to protect, and the whole thing is what we're protecting, right? Now, some of it we don't have eyes on. We don't have eyes into what's happening in the development team. So how do we fix that, address that? Now, your question about Gen AI, I think that makes it easier to get to information and maybe easier to consume it for people working up in their career. I don't think that's the solution, at least not to this problem.
Okay.
So also, John, to your point about why we don't seem to see radical change in security, my friend Brad Feld told me something years ago about technology in general. 95% of what we see is evolutionary, not revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
Those revolutionary things are like, they're signposts. Generative AI bursting on the scene in November will be 2 years. That was kind of revolutionary. The move to the cloud, 2005, revolutionary. The commercial internet, 97, 98, revolutionary. Everything else in between is evolutionary. In security, even more so, it tends to be evolutionary. So the security you see today is not the security we had 10 years or 5 years ago. It's very different, better in many ways.
When you say when you say evolution, is it an incremental
It's
change?
very incremental. It's very incremental. I'll give you an example. I was at an event last night talking to some friends of mine. One of them, CMO at one of the first sort of API security companies, right? API security burst on the scene maybe 4 years ago, 4.5, 5 years ago, because we realized a majority of the traffic on the internet is API communication, right? And most organizations didn't even know what APIs they had, let alone how they were configured and what their risk was. And so that first generation of API security companies, job one was, hey, what APIs do you have? Let us do a scan and figure out what APIs you have. And there were about a half a dozen companies that raised big money, had high market billion, unicorn valuations. They're basically gone right now. They're done, right? One of them had a decent exit to Red Hat. The other ones have fallen on some hard times. And we don't hear about API security quite as much as we did 4 or 5 years ago.
Even 2, 3, yeah.
Yeah. But there's a new class of API security companies now that are just focused on like SaaS-based programs that you use, which are basically working via APIs. So it's like SaaS API security. It's very specialized. It's an evolution from, and they don't start with what APIs do you have? They start with, these are your APIs. Here are our risk points. Here's how we got to configure them. It's that next level of evolution. And so we see that a lot in security in general, right? Mitchell mentioned firewalls. I remember a time where Checkpoint's OWASP, partner system, and we did this, it's still secure, right? That's how originally
It was.
It was Border Guard before it was StrataGuard.
It was Border.
That's how Border Guard works with the checkpoint firewall.
Yeah.
And then, that gave way to more advanced next-gen firewalls and Fortinet type, and NetScreen and Juniper. They all, Juniper bought NetScreen that. But, the firewalls today are very different.
Can there be like a revolutionary defense app or like some sort? Can that happen even as you build a defense? Doing something that's
It's interesting.
That kind of.
I mean, that's what I meant by,
Yeah.
you don't see like massive innovation or like something that's really transformed, like a generative AI hitting the market. The closest thing to that was blockchain, which got tons of attention and lots of overall.
Got nowhere, then went nowhere.
99% of people struggled to figure out.
It's a category, right?
Well, here's what I want to say is maybe the revolution is zero trust. Because that's a very different way of thinking about. I don't trust anything, right? Segment everything.
That was definitely sort of a revolutionary
That's what I mean by that
concept.
model change.
A concept.
Right.
Other revolutionary kind of concepts were, Mitchell mentioned it before, the whole move, it used to be that you would put 98% of your resources into thwarting an attack, protection. Now, the norm is to put a decent amount of resources, if not 50-50, into response. There was no such thing as threat intel and threat alerts when we were there, right?
Right.
When we started in security. Today, that's a big business threat intel, right? And I could trace, our friend Dov Uran, Amit Uran's brother, Dov, was one of the first. He had one of the first threat intel companies. He sold it to Cisco. So there are the API security thing of 4 or 5 years ago. We do get these revolutionary new battlegrounds, new battle, places where we do battle, but and then the technology to do battle at those new battlegrounds it rises above it. But I didn't see AI. Maybe is the new one here, but AI was here last year. I'm not sure where that next new one is.
Well, it's security. It's traditionally been kind of in the follow, right?
Right. Well, we are reactive.
We did this, and then how to
Right, you react to the action.
But
right?
I'll give you that.
My point was, I think today it's not all follow. Much more, a
No,
lot more
there's more
thoughts going
offensive,
into.
yes.
Like you think about people talking about how do we secure LLMs? They're not widespread everywhere yet, right?
But
So-
at least we're having the conversation. The same thing with quantum, right? We've got quantum proof algorithms. I'll give you another example, though. Coming out of this CrowdStrike thing, right? How did CrowdStrike work and with that whole agent thing? So with the Wiz, which is, hot company, well, depends how the market is today. Maybe that 23B looked good or it didn't look good. I had someone talk to me last night. I can't even talk about it, but they have plans. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. They do similar to what CrowdStrike does, but in a way where you don't need to have an agent, where you don't need to install stuff into the kernel. And so, I mean, they're smelling like a rose or like a whiz. As a result of this thing, you don't see them going out and doing that the same way Palo Alto does, right? I think there's winners don't have to press.
Right.
But
when you get to the end zone, act like you've been there.
right,
there
it's not
before.
like the first time. But that being said, so is what they have revolutionary because they're doing it differently? No, it's evolutionary, but it's different enough where there's a clear fork in the road here.
Okay.
And then going forward, there'll be people who play off that. And that, when you take the long view of cyber, I find it as like I'm a history guy or a history major. I find that fascinating, right? When you look at the evolution of these things. And it's not going to stop it. That's the way of the world here. And that's what makes Black Hat great. That's what makes RSA great.
And bringing it together is really, that's what it's about.
Well, you need a critical mass That's why I come, and that's why I've been in security, right? Beyond meeting the great people. Anyway, hey, we're out of time here. John, it's a pleasure having you here in person, man.
Great to see you all.
In
Yeah.
person.
Everybody knows you here, by the way.
Oh, they
They
do?
say, you work at Techstrong, you know Shimmy, and you know
Yeah.
Mitchell? I said, yeah. I work with them now.
Well, that's not always going to work well for you, John. I just want to tell you.
Maybe next time I'll just
Don't assume that's a good thing.
Yeah, there was a
Sometimes
hint
you
of
might say, "Shimmy
ambiguity.
who?"
There was a hint of ambiguity
Right,
when
right.
they said that, so I don't know
Shimmy
what
who?
to make of it.
Watch to see
But
what
it's
they
good
say.
to hear. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
We are going to be here the rest of the day. We're actually going to do some streaming. Well, actually, we're not streaming today. We're doing some recording that'll follow up. Of course, yesterday we streamed a bit. You could see that. And you know what? It's great to be a black hat. But for now, this is Alan Shimel on behalf of Mitchell Ashley, John Swartz. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Techstrong Gang live at Black Hat.